will introduce you to various aspects of behavior and show you how each can be strengthened in your own life. Stories and homilies from Dr. Peel. They will illustrate just how well the principles work when they are put into practice. You'll be given questions to ask yourself. The answers will give you an idea, in your own life, how well you're utilizing the qualities of a positive thinker. You may want to take a notebook and write down the answers to the questions. After you write down your answers, date the page and leave room for later note-taking. Then, after a few weeks, when you've absorbed the material and made it part of your life, go back to the questions again and answer them again. This way, you'll be sure to recognize the difference that's been made in your life.
At the core of Dr. Peel's work was the idea of being a positive thinker. He believed that any problem could be resolved and any challenge met if you just changed the way you thought about it. Positive thinking was his synonym for faith. In fact, his most famous book was first titled The Power of Faith. The publisher wasn't enthusiastic about that title and suggested another, based on a phrase that appeared often in the work. That's how the book came to be called The Power of Positive Thinking, a phrase that's become synonymous with healthy and successful living. Here's how Dr. Peel described this life-changing attitude.
Now, what do we mean by positive thinking? Naturally, it's the other side of negative thinking. Perhaps the best way to describe positive thinking is to describe a positive thinker. A positive thinker, he or she, is an individual who is tough and rugged mentally, and who sees every difficulty and who sees them straight, but who is never abashed by nor defeated by these difficulties, because the positive thinker knows that with the help of the good God in him or her can be handled anything you'll ever face up with in this life. Now, the people who've done extraordinary things in this world have, without exception, been positive thinkers. None of them ever believed that they could be defeated. They always knew, with the help of God, that they could, if they thought they could.
Dr. Peel believed that positive thinkers were set apart by their ability to rise above everyday problems. They talk about what's possible and probable and potential. They avoid negative thinking. Here's how he explained the phenomenon of positive results.
I have one great fact I would like to speak with you about this morning. In fact, the word great isn't descriptive enough. It is a tremendous fact, one that needs to be repeated time and time again to all of us, including the speaker. And that is that positive thinkers always get positive results. Negative thinkers will get negative results. But this morning we're talking about positive thinkers getting positive results. And why is this true? Well, one reason is the positive thinker is not controlled ever by the 3 L's: lack, loss, and limitation. The 3 L's: lack, loss, and limitation. He's not controlled by those. I wouldn't want to guess how many million people in the United States every day of their lives live by these 3 L's. These are the words that they say most of the time. You can hear them everywhere. It could be that we've even ourselves contributed to this doleful chorus. I lack this. I lack that. I lack friends. I lack opportunity. I lack. How often have you heard that? And then they'll say, I've lost that chance. I've lost my job. I've lost my money. I've lost my opportunity. Lost. And then you'll hear them say, I haven't quite got what it takes. I haven't got the ability that somebody else has. I'm limited by my background, by my family, by my health. I am a victim of limitation. So it goes. Lack, loss, limitation. But the positive thinker isn't controlled by those things.
No one who has ever heard Norman Vincent Peale speak will ever forget his stories. Somehow he always knew someone who had done something that was a perfect illustration of the point he was trying to make. These true stories from the lives of real people are the proof that positive thinking works.
Now I want to tell you about some friends of mine. They run a drugstore in a little South Dakota town called Wall, W-A-L-L, population 800. They bought this drugstore in Wall in the year 1932 for $2,500. And 1932 was the bottom of the Depression. There wasn't any money. How can you run a drugstore without money? And furthermore, there was a plague of grasshoppers, came along and ate up everything for 200 miles around, stripped the fields absolutely clean. And it's an agricultural economy, so how can you run a drugstore when you haven't got any agricultural money? And then it was very hot, and nobody was coming into the drugstore. The tourists were going by on the road. So they were about to fail, so everybody said. But they utilized the prayer-think formula. They prayed and they thought, and they got an idea. And you'll always get an idea when you pray-think. So Mrs. Houston, that's the lady's name, Dorothy, noticed these tourists going along the road in non-air conditioned cars, their tongues hanging out in the heat, and it was very dusty. And she prayed and she thought, and then an idea came to her, and she said, what is it that those tourists would rather have right now more than any other one thing in the world? And the answer came to her, what they'd rather have is a tall, cold glass of ice water. So she thought that over. She called her husband, whose name was Ted. She said, Ted, I want you to go down the road 25 miles and put up a sign. And on it, letter it as follows: free ice water at the Wall drugstore, Wall, South Dakota. And at 5 miles out of town, put up another sign: hold on, it's only 5 miles to Wall and free ice water. She got so excited, she presently had a sign at Albany, New York: 1,725 miles to the Wall drugstore and free ice water. And presently, through some GIs, she had a sign in Piccadilly, London: 5,227 miles to the Wall drugstore and free ice water. And presently, even had a sign in front of the Taj Mahal: 11,000 miles to Wall and a free ice water. These signs blanketed the whole nation. Result: if you were to go to Wall tomorrow, Monday, you would find 100 clerks handing out free ice water, and that there would be flocking into that store from 6 to 8 to 10,000 customers buying all kinds of merchandise, making it one of the most spectacularly successful commercial enterprises in the history of the United States. Out of what? Ice water? Why, druggists had been handing out ice water for years, free. She was the first one ever to think of advertising it. Now you see, Whenever there's a problem, down in the mind, floating in consciousness, is the idea you need to overcome that problem. All that's necessary is to float it to the surface. And it's the Lord God Almighty that floats it to the surface, so that finally it comes into being, this idea. I don't know what your situation is, but there deep in consciousness is the idea that you need to build your life greater. So the positive thinker gets positive results, always, because he doesn't think lack, loss, or limitation. He uses that great principle, the pray-think principle, which produces power in his life.
Now, perhaps you're thinking that your life is fine and you don't have any changes to make. You're happy with things just the way they are. Well, Dr. Peel had something to say about that. For him, change was as much a part of healthy living as was faith and love and courage and persistence. Here's how he explained it.
You don't want to go through life, do you, being all the same? Don't you ever want to change? Don't you ever want to be better? Don't you ever want to be greater? Don't you ever want to be cleaner? Don't you ever want to be finer than you are now? If not, God help you, or God help me. I'm not satisfied with myself. Not by a long sea mile, as the old sailors used to say. Nor should you be either. Well, when you become this new creature, you'll never be the same again.
We encourage you to work slowly. Give yourself time to absorb the many suggestions about turning new activities into old habits by consistently unfolding these qualities of a positive thinker into your subconscious behavior. And as you do so, keep in mind this advice from Dr. Peel.
About the best principle of life is to love the Lord, love people, give an honest day's work for an honest dollar, do your best, be good to everybody, think the right kind of thoughts, live the right kind of life, and then don't worry about it too much. I have an announcement for you from the Secretary of the Treasury of the United States of America. He said every American should say something positive to every other American every day. Now that is a statement that makes sense. For if every American would do just that, we would have a positive country. But I'd like to go further and say that every American, including every one of you here today, should say something positive to yourself every day. And that thing that you could say to yourself is,